On March 25th, the U.S. intelligence community released its annual threat assessment for 2025. The valuable report detailed how our enemies, Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea, are challenging U.S. interests around the world, attacking or threatening other countries in their regions using both asymmetric and conventional hard power tactics, or by promoting alternative systems to compete with us, particularly in trade, finance, and security. The report's most significant conclusion was that China now represents the most comprehensive and robust military threat to U.S. national security, in part because of its demonstrated ability to compromise our infrastructure through formidable cyber capabilities, which it could employ in a direct conflict. Economically, China bases its strategy on a centralized, state-directed approach using national resources aimed at dominating global markets and strategic supply chains, while limiting foreign competitors and making other nations dependent on it. China combines the full power of its state apparatus with its private sector in its effort to become a global superpower in science and technology, capable of surpassing the United States. In biotechnology alone, it plans to expand its domestic bioeconomy this year to reach $3.3 trillion. In the space domain, China has already surpassed Russia as a space power. It has achieved global coverage with some of its intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance constellations, and has reached a world-class level in nearly all space technologies. At the beginning of 2023, Americans witnessed an unprecedented news event broadcast live on television.
It's about 5:30 on Wednesday, February 1st, 2023.
The path of a Chinese spy balloon from Montana as it floated over the continental United States for several days.
I have no idea what this thing is. I hope it's in focus.
The balloon, ultimately shot down over the waters off South Carolina, was equipped with devices and antennas capable of intercepting communication signals and perhaps even transmitting collected information. The incident occurred just days before what would have been the first visit to China in 5 years by a U.S. Secretary of State. As a result, Secretary Antony Blinken canceled his trip to Beijing. China's response was a literal insult to intelligence. The balloon, according to the official explanation, was a weather device that had gone off course. Is and was Cuba a piece in this geopolitical chessboard? Perhaps Venezuela by extension? Less than 5 months after the Chinese spy balloon episode, the Wall Street Journal reported in June 2023 that the regimes in Beijing and Havana had reached a secret agreement for China to establish an electronic surveillance facility on the island. The newspaper cited U.S. officials familiar with highly classified intelligence. This was not the first time such a claim was made through open sources. In March 2016, then Florida Senator and presidential candidate and current Secretary of State Marco Rubio mentioned during a televised debate
and kicks out this Chinese listening station in Bejucal.
The existence of a Chinese listening post in Bejucal, south of Havana. Following the Wall Street Journal exclusive, other outlets like Newsweek and Politico reported that the Chinese electronic surveillance station may have been operating in Cuba since at least 2019. According to Politico, a senior unidentified official said this issue had been inherited by the Biden administration. Quote, "When this administration took office in January 2021, we were briefed on a number of sensitive People's Republic of China efforts around the world to expand its overseas logistics, basing, and collection infrastructure globally to allow the military to project and sustain military power at greater distance." Quote, "This effort included the presence of China intelligence collection facilities in Cuba," the official confirmed. In fact, the People's Republic of China conducted an upgrade of its intelligence collection facilities in Cuba in 2019. This is well documented in the intelligence record. Days later, a Reuters team in Cuba traveled to the Bejucal area, southwest of Havana, where the alleged Chinese listening base is located. The team filmed images of a restricted access military facility with large satellite dishes or antennas. Around that same time, Secretary Blinken finally made his trip to China, which had been canceled in February due to the balloon incident. When questioned by CBS News about whether he had raised the alleged listening base in Cuba with his Chinese counterpart, Blinken responded, "Yes, I did. and added, "I'm not going to characterize their response."
Did you raise the listening post in Cuba that was recently disclosed and you talked about?
I did. I'm not going to characterize their response, but I told them that this is a serious concern for us.
How widespread is this in Latin?
So we've been taking steps over the past couple of years, diplomatically, wherever we've seen China trying to create that kind of presence. We've been in there pushing back against it, and we've had some success in doing that. This is nothing new, but it is something of real concern. I was very clear about our concerns with China, but regardless of that, we've been going around to various places where we see this kind of activity, trying to put a stop to it.
The following month, Newsweek interviewed U.S. Southern Command Chief Army General Laura Richardson about China's presence in the region. She said, "Beijing's efforts have accelerated. Right under our nose."
I say that it's in the red zone, just to use an analogy there. They're on the 20-yard line to our homeland.
She added, "I could say they're on the first island chain, with what looks to be the instruments of national power that the People's Republic of China brings to bear: diplomatic, informational, military, and economic." The possible existence of Chinese surveillance bases in Cuba continued to circulate in the media. In July 2024, the Wall Street Journal revisited the issue. This time, it cited a study by the Center for Strategic and International Studies, claiming that, using satellite imagery, analysts had identified 4 electronic surveillance stations, including one previously unreported site near the U.S. naval base in Guantanamo.
The U.S. has always had the advantage because we've had the geography, and that's why Cuba would be an important asset for China.
In December, CSIS published its report titled, "China's Intelligence Footprint in Cuba: New Evidence and Implications for U.S. Security," asserting it had identified 4 sites in Cuba potentially supporting China's efforts to collect intelligence on the United States.
Russia used Cuba for decades because it was the one place that they could build a listening post and collect a lot of the data from the United States.
3 of those sites were located on the outskirts or south of Havana: Bajucal, Huajay, and Calabazar, and one on the far eastern side of Cuba, east of Santiago de Cuba. Despite the intense media coverage of China's alleged spy bases in Cuba, the puzzle remains incomplete. No U.S. government official or source has publicly and openly confirmed the existence of such SIGINT stations. Nevertheless, given Cuba's strategic geographic position and proximity to the U.S., this remains a plausible assumption. The February 2024 annual threat assessment from the intelligence community concluded that the Chinese military would continue seeking to establish overseas military facilities, including in Cuba. Cuba was the first country in the Western Hemisphere to recognize and establish diplomatic relations with the People's Republic of China in September 1960, just over a year after Fidel Castro took power. In November of that year, Ernesto Che Guevara was received in Beijing by the founder of the People's Republic of China and chairman of the Chinese Communist Party, Mao Zedong, and Premier Zhou Enlai.
Compañeros y amigos del gran pueblo chino, venimos hoy con profunda satisfacción a cumplir un mandato oficial de nuestro gobierno.
The visit was repeated in February 1965, and during that period, the new allies signed multi-million-dollar trade agreements highly favorable to Cuba, such as the supply of Chinese rice. The Sino-Soviet split and Havana's full alignment with Moscow cooled relations with Beijing for many years, until the late 1980s. The collapse of socialism in Eastern Europe and the dissolution of the Soviet Union marked a new turning point in bilateral ties. Late Chinese leader Jiang Zemin visited Cuba in 1993 and 2001. Fidel Castro walked the steps of the Great Wall in Tiananmen Square, where he paid tribute to Mao Zedong in 1995 and repeated the trip in 2003. Raul Castro also visited China twice, in 1997 and 2005. Former Chinese President Hu Jintao visited Havana in 2004 and 2008, and Xi Jinping in 2014. Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel visited China in 2022. China and Cuba share similar characteristics as regimes' one-party rule. Their relations span economics, biotechnology, telecommunications, critical mineral trade, such as nickel and cobalt, as well as military and intelligence cooperation. The China-Cuba relationship is a post-Cold War political marriage, but one that has been costly for Beijing economically. While China remains one of Cuba's main trading partners, many of its planned large-scale investments in tourism, mineral extraction, and oil production have not materialized. Still, China continues to provide loans and helps Cuba with solar panel systems for electricity generation, a critical issue on the island. Blackouts and electricity shortages can exceed 20 hours a day. Despite everything, Cuba remains an exceptional platform for both Russia and China. In summer 2024, on two separate occasions, Russian warships, including a nuclear submarine, docked in Havana after sailing less than 30 miles off the coast of Florida. And so, a timely question arises. Russia and China, what are they in Cuba today? Competitors or allies? Or do they maintain a coexistence based on a tacit division of spheres of influence and interests? 66 years after the Cuban Revolution, a Cold War fossil regime still breathes, albeit with great difficulty, just 90 miles from the coast of Florida, an enemy of the United States.